morning, everyone. Welcome back. Happy Monday. This is Faith Family Focus, and I am your co-host, Faith Suggs, former Duke Women's basketball graduate and current CEO and founder of Brand by Faith, a social media branding company dedicated to telling stories of our clients. And this wonderful man next to me. Sorry, my tea is making my throat all dry.
Oh, that healthy bone tea that you're drinking?
Yes.
Good.
It's the lemon juice.
Well, the lemon
This
juice.
wonderful man next to me is my father, Schaefer Suggs, former NFL player with the New York Jets and the Cincinnati Bengals, and has also served as VP and on the executive board with the RPFPC, also known as the NFLPA chapter of Chicago. Good morning, Dad. How are you?
You never get that right.
Well, technically it is right because it is the NFLPA chapter in Chicago.
Right. Yeah, you got it.
Right.
We all know what you're talking about.
Well, it doesn't matter, yo. You guys choose to go by RPFPC anyways.
I know, right? We're just trying to figure out what point should we need to change that. The retired professional football players should show. I would rather say former, like the former. Anyway, it doesn't really matter. Thank you for the introduction.
You are retired.
Former and retired, yes.
No, but like you're retired from football, so you're retired.
Yes.
So technically it's applicable.
So if I'm receiving pension benefits, that means I'm retired, right?
Yeah, so technically, yeah. Yeah. That's probably why, so that you guys don't get sued. I don't know. Something it always has to be that. But good morning. What a warm weekend we had over here in the Midwest. I know the whole country seemed to be just outside and just enjoying this heat after months.
Wait a minute.
So much.
Wait a minute, Wes. You were just here 3 or 4 days ago. So you were experiencing the same weather that I was experiencing.
Yeah, that's what I was saying. But Kansas is also in Midwest. So no matter where I was, once again, that was applicable. You keep trying to stop. Just appreciate. Just sit back and just be part of the show, Schaefer. But it looked like the rest of the country was finally, everything was open up. Outdoor dining is back out. I mean, people are in the parks. It's just nice. I mean, it's been a long winter. And I said this last show, we had so much rain the week prior to last Monday. And we had a thunderstorm yesterday morning and immediate sunshine afterwards. So I was like, maybe, but it's so beautiful out. I'm not going to complain about the rain because those flowers and the greenery, it's just a very beautiful spring. I don't know. I'm just happy for 2022 after 2 years of struggling through it,
Right. It is good. Hey, so before we start, I wanted to pay tribute and just to the families.
Yep.
For the loss of the mass shootings over the weekend. It's very, very sad. Just wanted to just pay tribute to those families and just prayers go out to those families. What a sad thing that happened in our country over the weekend.
Yeah. We can call it for what it is. It was a hate crime, yes. 100%. Unfortunately, we're having trouble with that. It was an anti-Black hate crime.
Right.
How many times do we have to see the same role? And I will say that yesterday was the 28-year anniversary that Australia had a shooting in their entire continent.
Right.
After one time. So I'm not saying that, they're better than us, but I do think that, this country's ability to opinion and freedom of speech could be what's causing us so much pain. And we have to have discussions about what's best for the youth and the next generation of this country and not just for our own personal opinions and pleasures, because 2 mass shootings in a 24-hour span is kind of too much.
Yeah, and we have a lot here in Chicago. So that's a whole nother topic. It's sad. I just wanted to pray those words out to those families and, it's very, very awful, and just continue to pray that we can figure out a way to just figure out a way, and I think, there's so many variables that contribute to those things that it's a whole different show, layers of it, and so it was sad. It just weighed heavily on my heart, and then of course, here in Chicago we had a few of them too. And right downtown by the Bean, you can't get any. It's right in the middle of downtown. So maybe that's a different show, Faith. But I think it's, there's so much to unpack there.
Well, I want to say one thing and make sure it doesn't get blurred, because here's the thing. about this country, it gets so blurred because we have so many mass shootings, unfortunately, that we can't keep track of the violence because of weapons. Um, there's a big difference between a irresponsible shooting, non-empathetic towards others and your surroundings, and altogether just using a weapon in a space of public. That's one thing. And there's another thing to wake up and grab a gun that is way beyond handgun and go into a grocery store and target black and brown people with the N-word taped to the edge of your gun. That's another thing. So we have, like you said, many layers to this issue. And the big layers is, one, we have a gun issue. Yeah. And two, we still have a racism issue and prejudice issue. And those two are mixing together constantly. So yeah, you're right. There are layers to this. Yep. Big time layers that we need to continuously have conversations about and not ignore it for what it is, because that's the only way for us to build and grow. Yeah. So yeah, I'll check up on your loved ones this week too. You know, sometimes you don't realize how heavy this can weigh on you watching this type of stuff happen routinely, especially as it gets warmer. We know that that's normally how it goes, especially in Chicago, unfortunately. But check up with your loved ones, check in with your mental health. It is Mental Health Awareness Month, but we are working on being conscious of how things affect others and ourselves too, you know. So yeah, you're right. There are layers to it, and they need to be discussed. It doesn't seem like they're being discussed enough.
Right. Well, I'll be more than welcome to have those conversations with you, because then I have much to say in terms of how accessible those weapons are in these inner cities. I mean, how do they get there so easily, right?
Well, it's not just the inner cities too.
Mm-hmm.
One thing that I'm seeing that's really hurtful is, as soon as we say something about a mass shooter, specifically hate crimes, and this isn't just, you know, black and brown. We witnessed the hate crime on AAPI, the Asian and Pacific Islander community, which it is AAPI month this month. We saw a mass shooting and hate crimes routinely against that community 2 years ago, just 2 years ago, right? So yeah, you're right. Accessibility 100%. And it's not just the inner city, because the inner city is just a response and reaction to the guns even being accessible to other communities who then invest to put them back, right? And then there's this neat reason for, as Americans, to think that it's necessary to have. So that's what, for me, it's just been frustrating to watch. Okay, this is a hate crime. We're watching hate crimes in a space that should be safe for us, like the grocery store. And when we say it's a hate crime, people say, well, what about black on black crime? And that's not that's not it. There's layers, right? Yes, that's a thing we acknowledge, and we're trying to figure that out and work on that. But it starts with, let's see what we can try control first. And that's, of course, our gun laws, our accessibility to guns. I mean, it just needs to be tweaked slightly. We always say this. I feel like every year we have a conversation where we feel like the Constitution needs to be a little bit adjusted and rewritten. I know that's not easy to hear, but it needs to happen. The rights to bear arms needs to have a 1A, 1B, 1C. We need to figure that out, because it's possible. We're watching other countries get it done. We need to get it done, right? And I'm sure this is a way to make everyone happy, except at the end of the day, and this is what I said before, Dad, it's about the next generation and creating a safe space for them in this country and in the places they go on a routine, like the grocery store, right? So yeah, that's my only thing.
School, grocery
It's
store,
always been schools. But you know what? You would think that schools would be the one that sets off change. But schools are where this started.
Yeah. Sad.
Yeah. So, you know, we could talk about it for hours, but that was I wanted to say that because we're constantly trying to unload the responsibility onto something else, and that's why we never get change to happen. And we need to call things for what it is, and it's an overall together umbrella issue with this one for sure. So yeah, like you said, prayers. There because you could just hope for change and pray for change and safety for your loved ones, and just hope that you know, live your life the way you wanted to live it, because it's only so short, you know. So
Right. No, thank you for sharing that. I always respect and value your perspective on things.
yeah, no, I'm glad we touched on it.
Yeah.
Yeah, I'm glad we touched on it. There's nothing else really we can say about it because we all know.
Yeah.
So let's talk about some basketball. Let's talk about what's been going on in the world, and um in the positive spaces for sure.
Well, there's a lot. Obviously there's a lot of positive. We're going through, um, um, basketball. There's hockey, but basketball right now is at a point where I really enjoy both the men and the women. I watch both sports, but I was very disappointed. I know that you're going to ambush me with Phoenix. I have no idea what happened with them.
It's not Phoenix you should be scared of.
Okay, so Boston, we should be scared of. Yeah, Boston.
What I say? We sat here 2 weeks in a row and I said Boston. Boston. I don't want to root for Boston. All right, let's talk about let's talk about the Boston Milwaukee game.
Well, you know what? Let's not spend too much time because it shouldn't have been a 7th game. Boston should have ended in 6th game.
Yep. But they had to do it back in the Garden. You know that.
Right.
I think my opinion on it, obviously, Jason Tatum's a bad man.
Yeah.
I said that.
I was concerned about him, Faith, early on, and I thought that they were punking him a little bit. I think he seemed a little tentative, and then all of a sudden he showed me a glimpse. What I saw glimpses of, but he showed me consistent, just Michael Jordan-like type, just cold-hearted, just daggers, just closing the plays out, man. And the timing of when he closed those plays out, it was like the time when you were to put the nail in the coffin. He did it. And he kept doing it because they kept coming back. They kept coming back and he just kept doing it. So I was extremely impressed with his play.
Yeah, you're hitting it right on the head too. Like, this team has been trending for a couple years now. Gathering the pieces, figuring out the team, allowing Jaylen Brown, allowing Jason Tatum to grow, get older. Marcus Smart is evolving his game, right? They added Grant Williams, big time get, and then they added Al Horford, right? So you can see that they finally have the pieces to the puzzle that has been trending, that Brad Stevens tried to put together years ago. Right? And that's why I said you should be scared of the Boston Celtics, because any team that has young talent like that together routinely for years in a row eventually hits gold. And what I said last Monday, I said the hardest thing to do in a playoff run is to be the defending champion. Because everybody wants to take you down. And you have all this pressure, not just from yourselves, but from the city, from the world, right? Because you've already done it. So they want to see, can you repeat? Because we've had repeats, three-peats. We've seen it, right? Can they be the Golden State Warriors? Can they be the Lakers? Can they be the Celtics in runs? They won't be, obviously, they're not dynasties. But it's the worst place to be. You rather would be the Boston Celtics going into that series.
You would rather be the Boston Celtics, you say?
Yes. You do not want that target on your back. They were able to play free. Right? They were able to play the way they wanted to play. And they had an easier first round.
Yeah.
And that's why I said what I said. To fear the Boston Celtics.
Well, I'm going to go really quick one. I got Boston over Miami. I have the Warriors over the Mavericks, and then I'm really concerned about the Warriors. Right now, Boston is playing the best basketball. I think. I think the Mavericks might be playing.
Mavericks, I think, are playing the.
I
It's
thought
hard. They're because once they get going in Dallas, that game's over.
see the perimeter play with the matchup between the Warriors and the Suns would have scared me with the perimeter play that the Suns had, right? I think they Warriors match up better with the Mavericks than they do. So
yeah, they do, and that's.
I know Miami's playing well. That's gonna be an old fashioned.
It's a good basketball.
Yeah,
good offense.
Right.
Great offense. Mm-hmm.
Yeah.
And I don't think Boston, for some reason, Miami is still hanging in there.
Mm-hmm.
The 76ers losing that last game, they looked disheveled. James Harden just didn't look like himself. Then Joel Embiid said James Harden isn't the player he was years ago. I thought that was wrong. That was weird to me. A weird thing to say in a press conference after a loss about your teammate. I don't know. I don't know with the 76ers. And I think that, and write me if I'm wrong, but I think that everybody expected the 76ers to do more than they did. And I'm trying to remind everybody that Ben Simmons was just there a couple months ago causing havoc in that organization. And their success was just getting him out of their organization and making it to the Eastern semifinals. So, I mean.
What do you mean by that?
Well, Ben Simmons, do you remember, like, we didn't think the 76ers were going to the semifinals. We didn't think we didn't. Because for more than half of the season, the discussion wasn't just the 76ers. The discussion was, is Ben Simmons going to play? Okay, now Ben Simmons isn't going to play. Now he's choosing not to play. All right, we're going through All-Star break. He still doesn't want to play. Okay, Ben Simmons is going to the Brooklyn Nets. James Harden's in Philadelphia. Right? And so now they just got James Harden in Philadelphia, and now they're trying to figure out how to now blend as a team. And there were moments, but I never saw a moment in those playoffs where the 76ers really blended. What I saw them do was make shots. And that was and that's why I didn't expect much from them going into that last semifinal game, because for some reason, Miami gives me the feel that they're a better team than the 76ers, but I don't think Miami's a better team than the Boston Celtics.
Okay.
And that was, I mean, the whole discussion, like, it's a thing, right? Everyone's trying to figure out why James Harden and Joel Embiid, two amazing MVP candidates for years, all-stars, leaders of the organizations, couldn't beat the Miami Heat in Philadelphia. I know why. So that's the big discussion. So bring it to the Miami and the Boston Celtics. I don't think that Miami Heat is going to beat the Boston Celtics, because I think the Boston Celtics are trending. They're moving. Right, they're flowing. They're on that ultralight beam. They're making all their shots. They're finding each other off the paint drives. I mean, they look good, right? They're making people play defense, and that's what we're seeing in these great teams that have been succeeding in the NBA playoffs. When we talk about Dallas Mavericks, we talk about the Phoenix Suns never gelled. They never looked like they got into their motion, the routine to look good. The Warriors, they had trouble with Memphis. But then that last game, they looked like the Golden State Warriors, and Klay Thompson did his thing. Because that's the thing you have to worry about. If you don't worry about Klay, you got to worry about Steph. If you don't worry about Steph, you got to worry about Draymond. You don't worry about Draymond, right? It's always something with that team. So right now I'm seeing there are really great offensive gelling teams in the conference finals. So cool to see.
Right.
Obviously, the Western Conference is better.
I'm looking forward to it. It starts, Wednesday? Or Tuesday or Wednesday, right? So, exciting.
Yeah, today's Monday. Yeah, so we'll see. I mean, my thoughts on it is to win it all from these 4 teams. Do not put the Dallas Mavericks too far down that list.
Right.
You know what I mean? Because that man, Luka Doncic, we're seeing something we haven't seen before in some of the stuff he does, and it's fun to see. You know what I mean? So I think that that Western Conference Finals is going to be very interesting to see how the Golden State Warriors can defend a team like that.
Yeah. It will be interesting. You know, as we pivot, I was just thinking about the old Celtics. You know, and of course your uncle hates the Celtics too. But I said, you know, I'm really rooting for the coach. I think he's a phenomenal coach. And I remember the Celtics had a black coach a long time ago. And, you know, Bill Russell was a coach at once. Did you know that?
Coach.
Yeah. He also had Casey Jones as a coach too.
Mm-hmm.
So it's kind of neat to see that. And as much as I think I have maybe a dislike for the Celtics because I was such a big Laker fan.
Yeah.
But it's kind of nice to see them back, you know, in the playoffs, and I'm looking forward to it. But let's pivot. You know, we talked a little bit last week. I thought last week was one of with May being Mental Health Month, bringing awareness to it. We really spoke to the impact that it's having on our youth, not just youth in sports, but our own personal experiences. And I know that we touched on some mental health. Last year we talked about Osaka and some of the professional athletes and the impact that it's having on their lives, and they're taking a stand. And I wanted to spend today kind of continuing our conversation from last week, but kind of continue about professional athletes, because more and more you're hearing more athletes speaking out, whether it's professional football players, tennis players, basketball players. You're seeing more and more of them speaking out. So I thought we wanted to continue having the conversation around this as we continue to bring awareness to mental health.
Yeah, we saw, and that's the thing, last year we saw Naomi Osaka and Kevin Love kick this off.
Yeah, he did.
Kevin Love kicked this off. DeMar DeRozan speaking out about his depression.
Who?
DeMar DeRozan.
Okay, yes.
And
what did he speak about? I haven't saw his story, but what did
he had depression when he was in Toronto.
Okay.
And which a lot of NBA players specifically experience. Specifically to the NBA. And we'll touch on that in a second. I actually have a question for that. But Naomi Osaka, Simone Biles, we saw them kick it off this year. Simone Biles and Naomi Osaka. We saw them kick it off with mental health because, and it created a split decision in this country about what we support and how we expect professional athletes to perform regardless of their mental health and mental stability. And a lot of people were upset. They said you should push through it. And a lot of people were accepting. So that really shined light, and visibility on where this country stands and what we expect professional athletes to do, and how we view mental health. And I think that we're slowly coming around, and we touched on all the spike in suicides in young adults, specifically in NCAA athletes and women in the last year and month. And so when I think about it, it's just pro athletes oftentimes don't have the grace from anybody to be able to not be okay. And that's terrifying, considering, and we'll talk about football, where sometimes mental health is specific to mental illness. And mental illness is something that you need help to overcome. And it's hard because, and I wrote this down, is can the very thing that makes them invincible be what's hurting them? And can our expectations of them be adding on to the pressure to creating their life as their own personal hell on earth, you know?
Mm-hmm. Mm-hmm.
And so I guess my question is, what do you think first, if someone had asked you, what do you think are the outside factors, or what do you think are the internal factors that cause mental health issues in professional athletes specifically through your own experience?
You said something that was powerful. Is we are put on a pedestal, and and when we're put there, it's almost like we're not a normal person. So there's an expectation for not being normal, whether it's fighting through an injury because you're tough, because you're an athlete. I mean, there's a fine line between taking care of your health and doing your job. And I think professional athletes, we're expected to do our job and not have anything else impact us. And now, as I get older, from the time I was in high school, and I can think about all the things that I experienced, whether it's my early injuries, right, and how that impacted my self-esteem and my mental health, because sports was my whole life. That's why I escaped to it. And now the one thing that I love doing in my life seemed to be over because I had injuries. And where was the support with that? I had to kind of fight through that and say it was okay. What if I didn't want to play anymore? Right? I could not even imagine that, but there's some athletes that don't come back there's some kids don't come back from that, And then as I experienced my professional career, and at the end of my career, I sustained another injury that along with my other issues with potential chemical dependency, it definitely just completely paralyzed me, in terms of, the pressure that I felt of letting people down, letting myself down, and then who am I? Who is that person? All of a sudden I'm just a professional athlete on Monday Night Football, and now here I am. I'm faced with, I don't know what I was faced with other than I knew I wanted to die. How many athletes go through that? They get to a point in their life where their careers, the one thing in their life, the one thing that their self-love is dependent on, seems to be over. All the people, all the unrealistic fans that are out there, all the superficial people, the whole world that you're in, it becomes real that it wasn't real.
Right.
Then what you're faced with is a scariness of, I don't know what's next because I don't have anything, So for me, it was very, very challenging. And I don't know how kids got through it, how athletes got through it during my time. And what you see now is more athletes now saying that it's okay to be, not
okay.
right. Yes, it's okay. So I hope I answered your question.
Yeah, you did. And I think that one thing you touched on reminded me of something. Is we talked about this. When all of those NCAA athletes decided they were going to turn pro and they decided to opt out of their college bowl games to prevent injury, the uproar of dissatisfaction from specifically the older football community, right? And the ones who speak with microphones in their hands were upset by this, calling them soft, saying that they were privileged, right? That's exactly what we're talking about when we say you're not creating a safe space for these athletes to make their own decisions. And I think a lot of what mental health in professional athletes is the perception of other people as well as their own personal battles. And I think that the pressure that people put on them is one thing, but people scrutinize everything they do, right? To a T. And that's not just athletes, that's famous people in general, right? Because we expect them to be who we want them to be, who we imagine they should be, right? And so when they don't perform that way, when they are injured, when they're struggling, when they have a bad game, and I can't help but think about, James Harden in these semifinals where people were tearing him up and down. That's exactly what we're talking about, right? When Ben Simmons, and Ben Simmons could be taking money or he could be really hurt. No one knows right now. We're in the in-between factor in the sports world, right? No, really, we are, right? No one knows because no one's the thing.
What do you mean? Let
when he
clarify that. So you're saying that Ben Simmons, we're trying to determine whether or not he was really hurt or not.
Right. That's the thing. Yeah, that's something. And he's saying it's a mental health thing stopping him from playing. It's mental health between his brain and his back, something stopping him from playing. And then he just had back surgery the other day. He had a herniated disc. I'm not saying anything the way people were talking about Ben Simmons is right. Do I think Ben Simmons needs to figure it out? Yes, I do. He's been on this league for 2 years and we haven't seen him play. But 3 years, sorry. That's exactly what we're talking about. The pressure and scrutiny around someone's personal business and their body and their mind and all that stuff being on the news, being talked about on First Take, getting opinions from every single person out there. Professional athletes not only hear that, but they internalize it, right? And so they add on to their own. Do we think Ben Simmons doesn't want to play? I don't think so. Do I think that he's frustrated? Sure, I do. I genuinely hope and think that he is, right? And we're just using him as an example because this could also be aligned with Simone Biles at the Olympics when she had to sit out because she had the twisties. But the scrutiny and the opinions and the frustration and the hate, and there's actual people like screaming things at them through social media and sending them nasty messages and mail and all that stuff, right? Because we think they're invincible. Because they're not lining up with who we want them to be in our minds. That pressure is 10 times, right, what a regular athlete would experience. Because now you have the weight of the world scrutinizing every single move you make.
I could not even imagine. I don't even know if I would have lived through that. Having that much accessibility to your life.
Yeah.
I mean, just immediate accessibility to blast your life out, right? And we're only human beings, so we live vicariously through
others,
through their perception of what people have of them versus, it's hard. So
right, because that's exactly what, especially in team sports. The perception of your coach depends on if you're going to make it on the field, if you're going to make it on the court, right? So as athletes, we're constantly aligning performance with approval from leadership, right? We want our coach to be proud of us. We want our coach to play us. We want our coach, right? All those things, right? So when we get to the professional level and your coaching staff is maybe one level above you, but at the end you're in a form of way of equal, right?
You what?
You're in a form of equality, right? You're here in the level playing field. It's not college sports where they have a hierarchy. Right. You are kind of here. Your perception, you have to look for that approval elsewhere, right? And there's athletes, and this isn't just professional athletes. There's college athletes who after games go to Twitter and type their name in and see what people say. And this college athletes do this too. So that adds on to what they're dealing with, right? Where grown adults are saying bad things about them, right? And so professional athletes seeing, Simone Biles is soft. She's weak. She's terrible. She's just making excuses. Or Steph Curry's not really hurt, right? He's just wasting our time, or he's making money on the bench, or this or that. And it's like, don't you see what you're doing to these people? And then when they speak out and say, I'm struggling with depression, people go, how are you struggling with depression? You have $1 million. All right. Right? And there's that circle.
Oh, I was just getting ready to say that, is that people basically discount it because of the money that they make.
Right.
They make a lot of money. They still are human beings. They still are people with emotions and feelings, just like you are, right? Just because you got a signing bonus of $50 million when you're 21 years old, don't mean that $50 million makes you a mature young man.
Or woman. Yeah, 100%. Like, the peak of career in athletes, not everybody is LeBron James, right? Where they're able to keep their peak part of their career like this and be able to move their bodies the way they are, right? And we can call LeBron for what he is. He's a freak of nature and he's just amazing to watch and witness, right? We've never had issues with LeBron with mental health or with this or that. And that's because one thing is we also don't know anything about LeBron James' personal life except for his family, right? Because the boys and everyone are now playing basketball. If LeBron James had spoke out about, hey, I struggled when he retired, and he said, when I was in Cleveland last year, before I went to Miami, I struggled with depression and anxiety, right? I struggled with like the pressure of just being the guy and with no help, right? We'd be like, see, and that's why he was weak and he went to Miami for help, right? Or people would be like, I get it. But for some reason, LeBron James saying that he struggled warrants an opinion from other people. And we can say like, yeah, mental health and illness come from inside factors for athletes, and we can pivot to NFL in a second because they have a completely different rabbit hole you can go on with mental health. But not only do they have frustrations for self-approval and self-love, like you talked about, but you hit it right on the head and you said that self-love aligns perfectly with other people's perception of them and the approval of other people. And when you're playing, the love you get from fans and this and that builds up your identity. So your identity relies on that love that you get from other people. So when the lights turn off or an injury happens, it's like, what do I do? No, there is no love, right? Because they forgot for a second where self-love and self-identity comes from. It's almost like that's what happens to athletes. That's what happens. And the reason why it happens is after you make a basket, people clap. After you score a touchdown, people clap. After you hit a home run, after you hit a first base, people clap, right? You hear that affirmation, right? And so everything you've built up, that love, that confidence, everything that you grow into is built off the not self-gratification, the affirmation from other people. And what you really need is that self-love and identity. It takes athletes a while to find that, but you hit it right on the head. We lean and rely as athletes a lot on the outside perception and how make people either they prove or they make us feel.
And then you have Simone and you have
Naomi
have the courage to stand up, but then still get criticized.
Yep.
Right. So it's damn if you do, damn if you don't. But but what they did was they opened the door to very healthy conversation around mental health in professional athletes. And hopefully, other athletes will stand up. And obviously, we're not where we need to be with that, but because athletes are committing suicide, right?
Yeah.
Well, how do we get them to speak up?
Here's one thing about mental health, and this is something that people don't matter. Then this is what I was just saying with LeBron. LeBron shouldn't have to speak up and say, I was diagnosed with anxiety, right? He shouldn't have to say that out loud, right? Who does it benefit? A lot of people if he does.
Right.
But it's almost like you said, damned if you do, damned if you don't. He speaks up, everyone crashes him down and kicks him when he's down, or they love on him. But likely there's going to be a group of people telling him, LeBron, you're soft. There's nothing wrong with you. This is blah, 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 blah. Right? And so I think it shouldn't be more about convincing the athletes to speak up, but more creating a safe and engaging space around them, like what we're doing right now, having conversations about why mental health is important, why it should be prioritized, right? Constantly reaffirming that, right? So that when these athletes come out, those naysayers are fewer and fewer and fewer as the years go on, right? That's what we can really do.
Right.
Because that'll make me want to come out. That'll make me want to speak up, right? Because LeBron James can get Elizabeth Cambage, Asia Wilson, right? All these people, Elizabeth Cambage, Asia Wilson, all these people, all these stars in their leagues, in their sports have spoken out, right? And when they did, we took them down. If I'm a 20-year-old football player at Tulane, right? Why should I speak out? Right? Who cares? Right? Because it just takes one person to mess it up for everybody. And so, yes, do speaking up help? 100%. 100%, because it's setting an example and it has people to look up to. 100%. But what we can do is try to keep continuously having these conversations and trying our best to create a space so that speaking up about their issues and mental health and the struggles they're having early can happen earlier than later, and we hear a sad story or an unfortunate event.
People are uncomfortable with stigma.
Yeah.
So we have to overcome stigma. And the more we continue to talk about it, the more we continue to eat away the stigma. That's the really biggest challenge, is the stigma, right? Not understanding. Yeah. But it's going to take time, and it's going to continue to take more conversations like we're having today. Continue to talk about not just athletes, people in the professional world who deal with some of the same stuff. People at every level of our life,
yep,
that are dealing with the same stuff. So, pivoted to the NFL. I mean, so for me personally, it's even more. People are asking me, with the big concussion lawsuit that we won a few years ago, we all had to take a baseline test. And, what is it? Now you hear more players talk about mental health. Professional players, we have the same problems that everybody else, but we also face some very unique challenges, such as confusion, depression, aggression, dementia,
PTSD.
Yeah. And then chronic traumatic, and I can't pronounce the word, but that causes us to repeat. And that is the one that you can't really assess until the brain is dead. And that's why Dave Dorson shot himself in the chest so they could study his brain. Well, those are things that now I'm in the middle of, as a former player, now looking at, my life and, saying, well, what impact did that have on maybe some of mine, and I don't know, because it's it's the repeated blows to the head, Faith, that they're talking about. And that's why the lawsuit goes on for your lifetime, because some people are impacted later in life.
What's interesting too is with football, yes, CTE 100%. That's number one. Two, special teams. People call that a war zone, right? That can cause traumatic brain. It could change your brain slightly, right? It could change how you look and move.
Well, let me break that down for you. Special teams is you got the offense and defense.
Mm-hmm.
Teams are the kickoff return, punt return, where there's a distance between the players, which increases the collision.
Mm-hmm.
Right? And so these are players that don't necessarily start, but the only way that they can stay on the football team is be on special teams. A lot of guys make their career out of being on special teams. You can be on you can make a team be on special teams. But those are the players. For example, on the kickoff, we had a player that we just call him the bullet guy. They would come down and they would break the wedge. The wedge was 4 guys like in a row, and there's a player in front of the ball, and their job is to break the wedge, just run their body into the wedge. Right? They don't do that anymore.
Right.
So when you said special teams, I really wanted for our viewers to understand what that meant, and that's why you see now the ball is kicked off where there's no return now. That's why you see punts, pure punts returned. You see in the NFL trying to take that aspect of the game out of the game, which was a weapon, but it can. There's a game changer. You kickoff return, a punt return, but the way that they have framed it is it makes it very difficult now to make a return because the chance of career-ending brain injuries, right? So I just want to share that with you.
Yeah, 100%. I think that's what people if you speak to even football players now continuously call it a war zone. You cannot see left or right. It's really you can only see what's in front of you. And half the time people know you don't get hit right in front of you. The third one, Darrell Rivas, and you and I watched this episode when he joined I Am Athlete to speak with Chad Ochocinco and Brandon Marshall. And Brandon Marshall is known for having, he spoke out about his bipolar disorder. Darrell Rivas said that he has been diagnosed with PTSD. And he says the PTSD didn't come from football. It came from just growing up in the inner city, in the hood, and seeing things and experiencing things and witnessing things that caused him to have nightmares and post-traumatic stress disorder. And he says, and he had a conversation, they had a really great conversation about mental health and PTSD and athletes and football players specifically. And it touches on that thing I'm talking about, right? And you hit it too. Athletes have more that's happening in their lives than just the game of football or basketball or soccer or right? There's more to it. So they're dealing with actual personal problems, just like you and me, just like Joe Schmo on the corner, right? And then you add on the heightened fact that everybody decides to critique it and give an opinion on it. That's the issue, right? Like people forget, like, oh, they also have lives. Yes, they do. So
there's a show called Any Given Sunday with Al Pacino, and Lawrence Taylor is in it. It was the first NFL player movie that sensationalized how football was and how the one wife of the quarterback, when he wanted to retire it, she basically said, "You're not going to retire because you're not going to change my lifestyle. I don't care if you got to take more hits to the head, but you're not going to retire." Lawrence Taylor, his role was he needed to play one more game to get his bonus, his $1 million bonus, even though one more hit would have killed him, right? And that's the kind of mindset early on that we played in, that you don't make the club in the tub, right? That was the term, And at the time, owners were like, okay, they knew, they banked on that. They knew that guys would just play hurt, play injured, play with concussions, right? Now the impact that it has. And then think about, let's layer that with the scrutiny that back then, and you add the social media today to that back in those days. You imagine what that conversation would be like?
Well, if people, and that's another thing, we have so much visibility to injuries. We can see an injury in slow motion. We can see an injury in sped up. Right. We see an injury 6 times after it happens, right? And it's posted on social media immediately, right? So maybe you guys needed social media, right? Maybe social media would have saved you a little bit, because there would have been that group of people that was like, this doesn't make sense. Why are they doing this, right? Maybe that would have helped you. But you drop a pass, you miss a tackle, you're not going to like social media.
Right.
You're not going to like Jerry, who's sitting on his couch eating his Cheetos, telling you that you deserve to die because you dropped the ball to win the game-winning touchdown.
a very antiquated, but the real part about social media was Monday Night Football.
Yep.
Back in the 60s and 70s. Howard Cosell was the commentator. And the Monday Night Football was the only game that the whole world saw. Okay, all the other games, you didn't see them. And Howard would make a comment about a player. That comment would make or break that player.
Yeah.
Right? So he was like your Twitter. He was like your Instagram. This guy cannot be in the league. He has no business in the league. Next week, he's gone. So after a Monday night game, Faith, he go back, to the locker room. What did Howard say about me? What did Howard say about me? Right? You were worried about it. I cannot even imagine what it would be like today with all the social media.
Yeah, but no person has that much weight over a person's. Because if that was the case, we see coaches go left and right.
Yeah.
Faster than they do, right? And what's his name? Jay Cutler wouldn't have been with the Bears for as long as he was.
Right. Well, my point was,
like situations like that. But it's good that doesn't exist anymore.
Yeah, my point was he was an example of what social media would do to a player back then.
Mm-hmm.
And I take it now, and
it's
so right, exactly.
It's more personally defeating.
Right. But the impact
career.
The impact, somebody's saying something that the whole world can hear and they validate it because he said it and how much it impacts. So when something on social media says this player is not hustling or this player is not this, on social media, the impact that not only it has on his performance, but also his mental health. I mean, he's reading that,
Yep, 100%. And the very thing that makes them invincible is the very thing that could hurt them.
I love that.
So, but no, what an awesome show. What a great discussion around this stuff. Great predictions for the NBA conference finals. Great group of teams in there and a great conversation about mental health for sure. And not just professional athletes, but overall mental health and people who are untouchable, out of reach in a way.
Right.
And makes them somewhat statue-like for some people, and they think they can't hear or see, and that's the very thing that could hurt them, like we said. So great show. We will see you guys we'll see you soon. There's no question. And we'll have another great show to talk about, hopefully some great basketball to cover. And thank you for joining us. Again, this is Faith Family Focus. We use our faith as a vehicle to help heal and sustain others by strengthening their family core. And of course, our slogan:
let go, let God, let go, let faith, let go, let love.
Everyone have a great, great, great Monday. We'll see you guys soon.